Hi, I'm Eliza Devine. I'm the admin of the Facebook page Autonomous, which is facebook.com/trueautonomy. I also run the YouTube channel All Things Debated. This is a video response to Bigot Vanquisher's video called Anarchy is Silly. I would like to thank her for inviting me into the debate, or welcoming me into the debate. I look forward to this subject quite a bit. I actually find it very surprising that Bigot Vanquisher would take the side of statism when statism in itself is a lot like religion in that it's worshipped by idols such as flags. If you would put that in place of crosses, it's pretty much the same thing. It incorporates brainwashing from a young age. I pledge allegiance to the flag, saying that before even knowing what the word allegiance means, running it over and over again through kids' minds. These are the same sort of brainwashing that's found in many religions. Indoctrination from a young age. So it really surprises me that Bigot Vanquisher, that you would choose to defend statism as something close to human nature, that you would choose to defend it and say that anarchy is the silly concept when statism in itself is another mass delusion, much like religion. It has the same idol-worshipping tendencies, the patriotism, the willing to kill and die for. It has all of those same elements. I haven't honestly been officially educated in terms of anarchy. I've never read Noam Chomsky. I've never read any of the many writers who have probably delved into the topic. I've instead explored it in my own experience in life, and that for me was during a time in which I was a professional dominatrix and exploring the BDSM social construct, the BDSM lifestyle. This is BDSM, if you're not familiar with it, bondage, discipline, sadomasochism, etc. It's a lifestyle, a fringe sexual lifestyle, in which people do follow hierarchies of dominance and submission, but they do it by consent. All of these hierarchies are formed by consensual means. Someone chooses a dominant or chooses to be submissive because that person does well for them or gets them off somehow, whatever the case may be. The idea is that the hierarchy construct is formed by consent. Consent is the absolute line. Consent can be revoked at any time and the hierarchy structure change based on the preferences of the individuals involved. My argument for autonomy, I prefer to call it autonomy rather than anarchy, maybe because I grew up in a time when I was told that anarchy is chaos and riots and etc. But the idea of autonomy for me is making consent the absolute basis of all human interaction. To me, and in my opinion, the only legitimate hierarchies or authorities are those which are consented to. It is actually, in my opinion, just as much a mass delusion as religion is, the idea that we have to have other people make our decisions for us. And you'll see how the idols and the delusions change over time. This idea of flags and how flags have power. Flags only have power by those who accept its power, by those who, because of those who give its power to them. And just as religious idols have changed throughout human history, all of these revolutions come about because someone breaks away from the collective and becomes and realizes their own personal autonomy. They wake up from the collective delusion and they question, and they decide that things don't have to be that way. And it is usually from those autonomous individuals who break away from the non-consensual hierarchy collective that figure out that things can change for the better, and that's usually when revolutions come about. But replacing states with other states, it's still the same mass delusion. To me, autonomy, or a basis of autonomy, means that you have the right to yourself, to start with you. It means you have the right to not participate in mass delusions like pre-chosen religions or pre-chosen states, pre-chosen laws and hierarchy forms that you had no possible way of consenting to. I will concede that autonomy is not the end-all. We are a very social species, and we have a tendency to form collectives. If nothing else, we are part of a giant collective that we don't really have much of a choice of being a part of. All things are one, and all of that other stuff. We are one giant family of many species, and we're stuck together on this globe, so it would be nice to learn to get along in a way that benefits. But when I think of autonomy, I think of starting all of those interactions with consent, with the ability to negotiate not just as an equal, but as your own self-owned, self-sovereign being, and to be able to choose which collectives you are part of, because there are many. Each person does want to, you're right, not everyone wants to live in a state of anarchy, which they have to make all of their decisions. Some people do want to submit to a more supreme power, and that is their choice. That is where autonomy comes in. If they want to be a part of a collective, then they can. That's how I think of things, as autonomous individuals and consensual collectives. Because I would never, just as I would never consider the authority of a mass murdering God, I will also never consider the non-consensual authority of a mass murdering state, police state, government, whatever you want to call it. If it mass murders people and expects you to salute to a symbol and worship it with tributes, no thanks. Never. I revoke it just like I would revoke the mass murdering imaginary God figure, because it is imaginary. The only reason this government exists is because it's a mass delusion. We are convinced from birth that we need it, that we need other bad people to protect us from other bad people. It's very insane. Why would you need those people to make your decisions for you? Why would you pay them to do it when they've shown year after year to do a very shitty job? Yes, we do have to work together as collectives because we can't actually survive without each other in most cases. Some people are very rugged and can survive just on their own, and that's great. If they want to do that, I have no problem. Yes, there are issues of accountability, but there are more issues of accountability when there's a hierarchy that you can't actually break out of or consent to. Statism and the belief that you have to give ownership of yourself and your decisions to someone else, whether it be a king who is supposedly closer to God, whether it be a man simply because they're a man and closer to God, or whether it be a state or government made by a bunch of old white slave-owning men hundreds of years ago who think they had or thought they had some idea of freedom, and who signed something on a hemp piece of paper which the government made illegal later. It's still just paper. It can be ripped. They're still just people, and they can be ignored. Until, of course, you give them a whole bunch of your money for them to build bombs to hold over your head and threaten you with if you do not obey. The idea of anarchy, the idea of autonomy, is a foundation of self-ownership, which in itself is the foundation of all concepts of human rights. You call hierarchies human nature, but not all human beings participate in it. There are some human beings out there who would choose to violate someone and to force them into submission and to do violence against them. And you have other human beings who would decide to love those people and help them in any way possible and be friends or consensual lovers. You can't call the worst half of humanity human nature and ignore the other one, and ignore the fact that not all people participate in things like non-consensual hierarchy or rape or murder or violence, that it actually has a lot to do with their collectives and the people who they're surrounded with, the people who they surround themselves with. We have free will. Whatever that means. We make our choices, and we literally make our world with everything we say, everything we do, everything we invent. We make it. And we can wake up from the mass delusion of the need for government control, just like we can wake up from the mass delusion of religion at any time now. I don't see why people still think that because it's like this circle. People are bad, so we need government made up of people who are bad, so people are bad, so we need government. No. When you create non-consensual hierarchy forms, then you create a lot of ease for people to take advantage of others and to not be held accountable. The whole shit rolls downhill thing, well, then why are you making the world a pyramid? So the person up top shits and rolls down onto everyone else. And the people on the very bottom are up to their chins in it. No, thank you. My idea of autonomy is living my life the way that I choose, respecting other people, and yes, I know it's not perfect. You could probably ask 12.5 questions and point out a lot of ways which it could go wrong, but you could do that with anything else too. It's a foundation that I choose for myself, not forcing anyone else to do it. You want to be in a communist society, you're welcome to. You want to be in a capitalistic society, you're welcome to. If you want to consent to be governed, if you want to be part of some, whatever, you're welcome to it. But I choose to start my foundation with the idea that I own myself and that the ultimate authority over myself is myself. That is my foundation. I make my decisions. And anyone else's authority is imaginary. And I don't give it power. If they choose, yes, anyone could choose to exercise their power of physical strength and weapons, but I'm not going to cater to the idea that I need to pay some other huge organized thug or mob organization who has claimed ownership over a huge chunk of the land on planet Earth to try and protect me from the littler thugs around me. I'm just not going to give in to that concept. To me, it's a concept of self-ownership. To me, it's moving above platforms of hierarchy and imaginary power. To me, this government is no different from the Mayan civilization that used to sacrifice and cut out people's hearts to hold up this delusion among their own people about their own power and their own right to the power because they supposedly know what God wants, and supposedly this government knows what the people wants. No, no thank you. No thank you. No, it's not for me. I don't like the fact that I was branded with a number as soon as I was born. The whole social security number, yeah. As soon as I find a way to, which could take 30 years or so, I intend to have that legally dissolved, because I never consented to it. Nor was I old enough to do so. I do not appreciate the fact that I was trained from a young age to pledge allegiance to something that I could not yet understand, much less understand what the word allegiance meant. I will not follow someone else's form of hierarchy just because they decide to put power to it by their own beliefs, by their own minds. If you hold yourself to the idea that they have power over you, then they do. Where do you think the power of religion comes from? It's a mass of people who believe that they're right and someone else is wrong, and either their God or their nation is greater than any other, so they have to do as much as they can to prove that, including bombing, mass murdering of children, civilians, under other nations, other slaves. I probably went off in a little bit of a ramble, but my point is that the state and the government, all of that hierarchy nonsense is just as imaginary, just as much a delusion as any religion in the world. So it struck me as really ironic that you, Bigot Vanquisher, would be the defender of governments when they are just as much a delusion and a religion as any other religion in the world. Thank you for allowing me to participate in this debate. I look forward to more of it, because I'm sure you'll have quite a bit to say. I also want to say that I'm very sorry to hear about the way that you've been treated since opening up this debate. It's very important to talk about our concerns and to be able to address fallacies and logic, and just to be able to talk about our differences without resorting to petty names and threats and yelling and just... So even if you don't agree with me, that's fine. I look forward to listening to your points, because I also have to grow as a person. And in my model of this ideal, as you would call it, my model of a utopian society, is that as an autonomous person, I should be able, as autonomous individuals, we should be able to communicate with each other, to use our words, to collectively either agree or agree to disagree, or to build on our foundations and on our ideas, to build a better world together by figuring out what would make a better world for each of us. It's the only way to really operate as a collective, if we choose to do so. I really hope that the people here on YouTube, on Facebook, decide to grow up a little bit, and I really hope they decide to take the idea of debate and constructive criticism a little more seriously, a little more like something to be respected instead of something to be discouraged at all costs. No, not everyone is going to agree with the idea of autonomy, because a lot of people did grow up very dependent on collectives, whether they originally consented to be part of them or not. Some people are very happy and content that way. Their lives are going just fine being a part of their collective. And that's fine. I don't want to take that away from anyone. My ideal is that everyone be granted the choice. of whether or not to be a part of a collective, which collective to be a part of, and that they be able to operate equally if they so choose. If they want to be at the bottom of a hierarchy, because there are people who are genuinely submissive, and if they wish to be that way, then that's fine. I'm okay with that. Just don't ever try to tell me that I have to be to match your ideal of the world, or your or your perception of the world. I hope you have a great day.